Hello class, my name is Professor Thursday, and this is the History of Music Abridged. Let's take a look at the short version of the history of dubstep. In 1979, America killed disco. Disco dominated mainstream culture from 75 to 79 until the public revolted with a clear message to big corporate music, no more disco. And then disco traveled to Europe, becoming Italian disco, and continued to thrive in Western Europe, where the club goers of discotheques were not yet tired of hearing this new sound. Now in America, the disco name dropped from the music labels, but clubs still had to play something for its customers. So this gave to the rise of garage. Now the genre is named garage for two reasons. Firstly, coincidentally, it was named after the legendary Paradise Garage nightclub in New York City, where DJ Larry Levin bucked the trends and played whatever he wanted. The type of disco he played was a stripped-down version of disco, without the swelling horn section or the orchestral strings. It was a very proto-punk version of disco, the type of punk commonly found in garage bands in the early 1960s. It was a minimalistic approach to the genre, incorporating the popular Quiet Thunder slow jams aesthetic of the late 70s R&B and soul. Simultaneously in Chicago, disco evolved into house music, named for the black urban house parties where it was played. House music involved blending different tracks live through turntablism, and it wasn't long until the artists began to record their dance music to release them to the clubs. Unlike house music, garage was almost never instrumental. It held on to the idea of disco divas and some light jazz work in its music, which is probably why the UK picked it up. In the early 1990s, UK clubs discovered techno, a Detroit-based minimalistic house music, and techno served as a gateway to American club music, helping garage and house music gain popularity in Europe. Deep house music evolved during this time, combining soul and jazz into house, creating a more organic sound. This was in contrast to techno's electronic vibe. The effort here was to step away from the techno sound and become more organic in a sense. Deep house got its start in Chicago in the late 1980s, which makes sense to go in this direction because of the rivalry between Detroit and the Windy City in this genre. But Chicago wasn't alone. San Francisco had its sound, Philadelphia had its sound, and so on. Techno wasn't going anywhere in the US, and that's why it jumped ship to the UK. Now, like garage, deep house was appealing to a more sophisticated crowd. It was the yacht rock of electronica, but with more soul and R&B. So of course the UK was going to have their own version. London clubs had spent the 1980s trying to connect old-school 60s soul music with electronica club music, two of the favorite genres of the 1980s British youth. Techno brought the culture of raves to the UK, but house music was where it's at. Or shall we say, Euro Deep House. It was less organic than the American counterpart and delved into the electronic techno side with laid-back chord pads, some Latin instrumentation, and tribal percussion. Euro Deep House was more cinematic in some aspects than the American version. So in the UK scene, it also had its version of garage, or UK garage. Same as before, we stripped down the popular electronica genre, and this time it's house rather than disco music, and then the result is a bassy version of club music. Because of the Jamaican dub influence in the UK music at this time, we end up with speed garage, a Jamaican dancehall call and response, and other reggae sound effects were mixed in with experimental bass lines and sound effects. The UK garage scene was made of secondary DJs who preferred to experiment with sound than appeal to large masses. This time with strict vocals, breakdowns, and builds, and it was highly competitive. The genre itself evolved quickly. Its popularity rivaled Euro trance in the late 90s, but eventually it switched gears at the end of the decade to a two-step garage due to overexposure. Two-step garage is less aggressive, down-tempo UK garage with less Jamaican influences. Promoters realized that overtly aggressive garage music turned women away from the clubs, which was the whole point that men went to the clubs. So the DJs incorporated the R&B diva singers back into music and brought back the females to the club scene. In the early 2000s, hip-hop was a new king in town. Since UK garage was slowing down for R&B cross-pollination, the UK rappers hitched a ride. This genre is called grime, a combination of two-step garage and UK hip-hop. It was built for the clubs with that flavorful American hip-hop gangsta attitude. Rapping over old disco and jazz music was pretty much how American hip-hop got started, so this really isn't much of a surprise. Grime is a genre made by and made for lower-class black people in London. Now eventually the DJs took back the scene with dubstep, and dubstep is just instrumental grime, minus the rappers, and with a splash of Jamaican dub music used in the UK garage. The DJs got to experiment again with drum and bass, stretch notations, and hyper-aggressive sound effects. By 2008, big music industry grabbed a hold of dubstep and turned it into brostep. Now this is the genre's sound that most people recognize. Thanks largely in part to the popularity of Skrillex, brostep took over the scene as a music made for frat boy college parties. The Americans call this new music dubstep, as this over-the-top aggressive sound even overtook the dubstep label itself. It spread like wildfire in the now decimated American mainstream culture. This was garage music that went full commercial and killed the innovative spirit that inspired most garage DJs. Eventually, it produced its own social hate cloud that brostep and the name dubstep fell into the overhyped and overplayed category. It suddenly vanished from mainstream relevance. It took most of the electronica in American media with it. In Japan and South Korea were not quite done with this genre yet, so they'll pick up where America left off in the early 2010s. So that's the short history of dubstep. It went from disco to garage to house to techno to deep house to UK deep house, UK garage, two-step garage, grime, dubstep, and then finally brostep, and then it faded away. Garage itself still lives today under the guise of chill step, future bass, ambient, down-tempo, or new garage. Take whatever popular electronica music is out there now, strip it down to basics, and there is garage.